And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Parliament of Geeks, where we ask and answer one simple question. Be it weeb or be it scrub. Normally there would be a gavel pressed, but Matty, our soundboard guy, is not here today. He ended up sitting this one out. So we're going to be playing it by ear. Or to quote a certain asshole, fuck it, we'll do it live.
Exactly.
Isn't that asshole retired at this point?
He is, if I'm remembering correctly.
I guess he ran out of people to bully.
Heh.
Although maybe these days he'd end up on the other station. But so we are no strangers to the works of Masaki Yuasa. Here. And that actually, before I even do that, I just realized I screwed up my own intro. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have 1, 2, 3 good brothers. Ha 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 ha. We have making his Parliament debut, our resident waifu hunter, good brother Akira. We have the flamboyant flyer and our resident Wikipedia man, good brother Flutter. And the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
First of all, truncated. Okay. Second of all, Zadari Enterprises would like to remind you that a helicopter with rockets is the great filter for people who are bad at video games. Learn to use your robots better, everybody. Learn to think. Because Armored Core has come back, baby.
You know, it's times like these where I wonder, how many people who can't handle the helicopter would have failed pilot training.
If they think the helicopter's hard, have they never fought 9-ball? Oh wait, they're usually new to the series. Never fought 9-ball, never fought White Glint. Just some issues.
But as I mentioned before, we are no strangers to the wild and wacky world of Masaki Yuasa's work. Some of you may recall a while back we covered Kaiba, which is a very interesting beast.
Beast is, I think, the right word for Kaiba, but ultimately, we did rate that one weeb.
Mm-hmm. The point is that his stuff gets weird, especially when he's both the writer and the director. I know weed is heavily frowned upon in Japan, but I sometimes wonder if there are other drugs he's getting involved in for some of his creations.
Possibly.
Though he also has the habit of trying to see how much he can get away with and still call it animation, which has kind of been his MO since his debut project Mind Game, which some of you may recall was used as an April Fool's joke for Tatami a few years ago.
Yep. I remember.
It was very funny watching the Tatami hashtag feed and seeing people come to grips with what the fuck they're watching.
The answer is yes. What the fuck am I watching? Yes. That's not an answer. Yes, it is.
Look, I may cover it in
yes.
I may revisit it for a movie night one of these days, but the most normal thing in that movie is the protagonist outrunning God. Yes, I said. I know some of you may say, "Isn't it weird for somebody to be outrunning God?" Yes, and then it gets weirder.
Yeah, that's the baseline for the weirdness. Like you said, most normal thing.
I'm grading on a curve here,
Yes.
which is why Tatami Galaxy is an interesting beast, because technically speaking, it is an adaptation, and I'd say the best way to curb Yuasa's habits is to not have him write, but simply have him direct.
Yeah.
Because Tatami Galaxy or Yojohan Shinwa Taikei.
A 4.5 to Tommy. Was it 4.5 to Tommy? Like story or chronicles?
Yeah, Chronicles was a varsity novel written by Tomihiko Morimi, and was later adapted into anime thanks to Masaki Yuasa and Madhouse. It did get a sequel called The Tatami Time Machine Blues, which I have not seen. Apparently, but apparently that novel is slated for an English publication. Part of it came out last December, and the other part is supposed to come out this September. Interestingly enough, in a lot of these we try to go with 12-episode anime. In this case, it was 11 episodes, which kind of messed with our scheduling setup.
Mm-hmm.
I am aware of the net animation adaptation of the Tatami Time Machine Blues. We will not be covering that because that's a different kettle of worms, since it's a combination of Tatami Galaxy and Makoto Ueda's play Summer Time Machine Blues.
Uh-huh.
But what is interesting is, much like with Kaiba, this premiered on the Noitamina block in Japan.
Which, for those of you who still haven't gotten the joke, that's just the word animation spelled backwards.
Mm-hmm. Even to the point where it's lowercase except for the A at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, I will insist on bringing up that joke because everybody would never shut up about Relics being killer spelled backwards back in TNA. But this was 11 episodes long, and I will note one thing. This has been available through Funimation, so you should be able to find it on Crunchyroll. But I will give a bit of fair warning. There's a lot of very fast talking, so
Yeah.
keep an eye on the
Fucking.
subtitles.
Hold on a second. I'm gonna. check
Even then,
something here.
the subtitles don't even last that very long to even read them.
So Tatami Galaxy is not actually available for streaming anywhere, Monk.
Fuck. You'd think it would be, since it was licensed by Funimation a few years back.
Seems like that license is since expired.
Like it says here that it shows maybe stream free with a trial on Crunchyroll, and I'm trying to follow the link from Just Watch, but if I search it up in Crunchyroll, God, I hate how the site has changed. Yeah, there's no Tatami Galaxy when you search Tatami Galaxy in Crunchyroll. You get things like House Spirit Tatami-chan, Galaxy Express 9.99, a Galaxy next door. There is no Tatami Galaxy on Crunchyroll, so, and there's nowhere else to stream it either. Likely, if we go briefly to Amazon, look up Tatami Galaxy. Tatami Galaxy is... They've got the novel as an audiobook that you can purchase through Amazon's Audible Audio, and as a paperback and as an ebook for their Kindle. You've got a guide, and then you've got the Blu-ray series, but it doesn't show a price. And when I click on it, it says they're $99.
So once again, we have a case of an absolute classic that is not available through the official means.
And that's okay. And the $99 is for the 4-disc version, which has Blu-rays, DVDs, and a digital version, instead of the 2-disc version, which is just Blu-ray and digital. But the Blu-ray and digital has no stock. Additionally, when I click on either of these options, one of them says no stock, the other one says see all buying options, and the only place that has one that's like new is the collectible for $99 from I don't even know how to pronounce this, but part of their username is delivery may take weeks, please check ETA. As one word. So, getting Tatami Galaxy as a show, fucking impossible, apparently. I'd also like to note, just for anyone who is wondering, this never got an English dub.
Which is for the best, I would say, because there's a lot of jokes and a lot of remarks in this anime that I don't think translate well.
Yeah.
This is in that same category as, say, Zetsubo Sensei, where I know that there was an English release for Zetsubo Sensei, but they didn't even try dubbing it because there's so many jokes that just don't work in English.
Mm-hmm.
Because Japan loves their word puns, and every character was some sort of in-joke. And in-jokes that don't work in English.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have things that aren't going to translate, and I'm pretty sure that phenomenon works both ways. But as I said before, this was handled by Madhouse as far as the studio, which meant that you had Madhouse's production value, and these two are a natural fit because of the interesting style of animation that was employed here. Which, Zan, I think you did the best job at summarizing the style that we saw here.
Okay, so the way that this style works, as somewhat surreal as it was, the animated elements are very simple for the most part. You can actually see on the splash screen here, which I think we need to point out to Shades later that he misspelled Yuasa. But the characters are all very easily identifiable and simple, but they have striking features about them. Especially on the far left there, we've got a character we will definitely be coming back to. And of course, the character second from the right, we'll be getting back to him too. Beyond that, settings were usually quite simple as well, and a lot of the setting pieces had mixes of images of real places that had then been overly rotoscoped in many ways. like when they had the train passing behind the boarding house, it was a picture of a real train in Kyoto going through its normal day. It's just they then overlaid it with some massive cell shading, turned it all one color, and made it look like it had been overly rotoscoped. It was really cool. It's a surrealist animation style that suits the narrative of how surreal the whole experience is, and it seems rather dreamlike.
Which definitely fits, because as I mentioned before, this Yuasa has had this thing of trying to push the boundaries on what could be considered animation.
There, like I said, there's only a few characters in the show who are a little more detailed than what we see here. One of them you could hesitate to call a character. She's quite the silent but dignified lady. And another one actually kind of looks like paper cutouts from South Park, inspired by Toy Story. If everyone knows who I'm talking about.
We'll get to him.
But the level of detail is actually kind of what shows the level of focus and importance in the story of that episode. People who have little to no detail are unimportant. They're background characters. They're people that our protagonist, as we'll get into, doesn't care about. The more detailed someone is, the more important they are to the protagonist. Among other things. But we'll get to that when we get to the final episode of the show.
Yeah. Now, as mentioned, this is 11 episodes, but it does have a bit of a chamber play aesthetic because the cast is very small. In total, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 characters.
Well, and that's
the entire cast. And
that's the entire cast that's voiced, yes.
Mm-hmm. But the first thing that we start out with in the first episode is our protagonist, who does not have a name. Once again.
The protagonist, since this is all a show from his point of view, a series of events from his point of view, he always refers to himself as, well, me. Nobody ever refers to him by name. Many people just refer to him as you or senpai in the case of Akashi, which we'll get to. And he is an interesting guy. Let's put it that way.
And he ends up meeting someone who claims to be a god of matchmaking at this weird cat ramen stall.
Remember, there's rumors that that they use actual cats in the ramen, but it's so tasty that he wouldn't mind anyway. You'll learn that there are some catchphrases about certain things in this show. That's one of them.
Uh-huh.
Yep. But apparently, the woman Akashi will be bound to either the protagonist or Ozu. And this is after going through the opening, which is another banger by Asian Kung Fu Generation. Then again, I've yet to hear something I don't like from them. We have him reflecting on the first 2 years of his pursuit of a rose-colored campus life, as he was a wide-eyed freshman for it's assumed to be Kyoto University, but it's never outright stated what college he's going to.
Yeah, it's very likely Kyoto University, considering he's in Kyoto. We see all the landmarks in Kyoto, and it's a fairly prestigious university.
Mm-hmm. But but there's all these options to join various clubs, and he figures that joining one of them is a good way to expand his social circle.
And in colleges, they're actually referred to as circles because they have a higher social element than normal club activities back in high school.
Mm-hmm. And he ends up joining the tennis club called. The problem is, the club is composed mostly of couples, and he's the odd man out in more ways than one.
He was hoping that joining the tennis circle would give him a raven-haired beauty.
Mm-hmm. And
you'll hear that one a lot too.
That and rose-colored campus life.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ends, in the dumps of how much time he had wasted in that club, he ends up meeting a man who is described as thoroughly unpleasant, and looking almost like a yokai than a normal human.
A yokai or something slimy and slithery that came out of the depths of darkness.
I don't know. I always got the vibe of a kappa.
He has a kappa. I think at one point he actually does literally be a kappa, but that's a different episode.
Just without the saucer.
Yeah, he doesn't need water in his head.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't think he likes cucumbers all that much, and he isn't going to steal your asshole ball. For those of you who don't understand that, go look up the kappa and look up shirikodama,
mm-hmm.
which is allegedly a dama meaning sphere and shiriko, well, meaning your asshole.
Yeah.
Allegedly, that holds some of your vital essence, and when stolen by a kappa, you'll die.
But he ends up meeting this man who goes by Ozu, and Ozu does not even try to hide how shifty he comes off.
To the point where the protagonist blames him for a lot of bad shit that happens over the 2 years that they're acting together. And because Ozu, in this particular instance, leads them to become the Black Cupids of the tennis circle, trying to break up everybody and stop all love from happening.
Mm-hmm.
And but Ozu, as often as he helps the protagonist, also kind of shits on him or betrays him. And when they're arguing about it over some sukiyaki, I believe it was, Ozu tells him, "That's just how I show my love. We're connected by the black thread of fate." And that's in response to the protagonist going, "You're always treating me poorly, and I wish I'd taken a different path in life because I never would have met you." He's like, "Oh, well, you would have met me in one way or another." Oh, how true those words turned out to be.
The side matter is his meeting with an underclassman, Akashi, because by the time that him and Ozu have had their relationship, it's been 2 years. Akashi, go ahead.
I was going to say he meets Akashi about a year in because she's a year under him, so she's a freshman when he's finally finally finished his first year.
Yeah, and Akashi is described as a good girl, but definitely cold,
aloof,
to the point where I think one of the best moments with this was when somebody even thinks about taking one of the books at a bookstore without bringing it to the stall first, and laser eyes happen.
Yep, it was a outdoor like book fair thing, and he thinks about taking the book, and she's like, "You're gonna pay for that, right?" But just with her eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there was that other part where somebody tried to proposition her, be like, "Yo, you want to go on a date?" And she froze him over, literally.
Yeah, but despite all
And
that, she seems to have a extreme fear of moths.
and
I don't
there's
blame
another,
her.
There, moths aren't that bad. There's one more catchphrase to catch here. Every time that he first meets Akashi and she does something cold and aloof, he's like, "But she's just living her best life." And I keep thinking to myself, "You go, girl. You live that life." From a distance.
Should that count as simping?
I don't think it counts as simping because he's
no.
not giving her anything.
Yeah.
It's more bystander than anything.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But the other recurring thing that ends up happening is him meeting a fortune teller who keeps telling him more or less the same thing. That you're a young man who you're a young man who has opportunity dangling in front of you, so you need to take it, otherwise you're going to live a life of regret. That'll be 1,000 yen.
For now.
But eventually this tennis story culminates during the Daimonji festival.
Yeah, well, specifically Gozan.
Gozan no
The-
Okuribi,
Yep.
which for those who don't know is part of a bonfire festival that usually happens in August.
And usually happens, or almost always happens, in Kyoto. In fact, is in Kyoto, and it's part of Obon. Obon being a festival, I guess, kind of like parts of Halloween, where you're venerating the restless soul or the souls of the ancestors.
I know that Maui has its own version of it.
Boo!
Actually, no, that's not a joke.
I know, but still boo. That's terrible timing, Monk. Come on now.
I learned about it when I was at Maui 10 years ago.
Monk, I have to boo you simply because of recent events.
Yeah.
It is the rule of the riff. I'm sorry.
Fine. But and it turns out the dangling is because there was a certain charm that Akashi had collected.
And she uses it to calm down whenever shit happens that spices her up, which we find out during the Moth event, the Mochi Guman set. But she's missing one because they come in sets of 5.
And he happens to have found that last set, but he never got the courage to bring it to her. There's also not Akashi ends up helping the protagonist, but there's always mention of some kind of promise. In this case, the ramen stall behind the shrine. That's the cat ramen shrine that was at the beginning of the episode.
Yep. Take her to Cat Ramen, and she says, "Cool, let's do that."
There is the idea of trying to set up for him to confess his feelings to Akashi, but things end up getting out of hand. You have Ozu somehow managing to stir up trouble with the fireworks that go wrong. He ends up getting chased off a bridge. Things go into a shit gets real territory. And as our protagonist is getting knocked off of the bridge, he thinks, "What if I chose a different club? Would things have gone as south as they did?"
You missed one very important detail about all of that sequence of events. Somehow Ozu off-screen stirred shit up. It wasn't just the fireworks that he and the protagonist worked on, but because of the previous discussion with the god of matchmaking, The protagonist wonders, can I really have a love life? But I've been ruining love this entire time. I should never have a love life. I should remain the Black Cupid. And then he goes to the goes and finds the god of matchmaking, because the god of matchmaking apparently stays in the same building as him. And says, can you really have me with her? And he's like, yeah, just come with me to Gozon. And they go to Gozon, and they're out in the street, and he's like, if you cross the street here, as they light Daimonji, you will find her at the end of your path. Go and tell her how you feel. And that's it. And so the protagonist does as he says, and as he's approaching Akashi, he gives her a simple greeting, says things are okay, and instead of confessing how he feels, keeps walking, says, this is enough, this is a start. And then Ozu appears, dressed in a dress. We don't know why he's in a dress, or why he's using a padded bra. While running on the railing of the bridge. And he's like, wait a minute, you just thought that was enough, didn't you? And eventually, the crowd that is pissed off at Ozu pushes Ozu off of the bridge. Our protagonist rushes towards the railing of the bridge to try and catch him, and he watches as Ozu falls in. And then the rest of the crowd that's been chasing Ozu is like, wait, you're a friend of his? And that's why they throw him over. But as you said, with that, we get the thought from him, what would have happened if I had joined a different circle at the beginning of my college years? And with that thought, we see the clock tower, and we see it suddenly wrench to a halt and begin running its clock hands backwards.
Monk, you still there?
I am now. Sorry about that. Technology likes to fuck us. But this brings us to our second story, Film Circle Misogi, where instead of the tennis club, he joins the movie circle, thinking that he'd be able to make films that would give him that rose-colored campus life. But all his films are rejected by Jogasaki. He ends up meeting Ozu, and the two of them end up trying to make movies on their own. They're all terrible. And instead they decide to shoot a documentary that turns into a hit piece on Jogasaki, while Jogasaki himself is trying to do a version of Alexander the Great with himself playing Alexander.
Because Jogasaki's a bit of a egotistical bastard.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to point out that there is one person who likes the protagonist's movies, and her name is Akashi.
Mm-hmm.
And she sometimes helps around with the movie circle, even though she's an engineering student that's usually with the Birdman Club.
But
she's fucking everywhere.
But upon seeing the reveal of the expose film, because they swapped the reels, she does not care for that particular film.
Yes, but the big reveal here is to one of the more detailed characters artistically in the show. A gentle and silent, refined lady by the name of Kaori, who seems to be Jogasaki's belle, and is also a love doll. That's right, you heard us? She's a love doll.
Fucking weirdo.
But Jogasaki keeps excessive care of her. brushes her hair, puts on her clothes, reads to her, and her performs her other likes and dislikes as if she's a real person. Needless to say, a lot of this gets into the film. But some other stuff also gets into the film. Like the fact that Joe Gasaki once did a swimsuit casting call with over 100 girls and categorized all of the girls by their boobs. Size, shape, firmness or sagginess, all of these things figured in. And possibly the most creepy of all, his fucking climbing wall. His fucking climbing wall, Monk. Made entirely of silicone titties.
This dude is completely down bad,
You know,
and it shows.
normal in any other circumstance, I would say don't kink shame. Sometimes I say kink shame more.
In this case with Joe Gasaki, I would say, how do you shame that which is shameless?
Well, public flogging works.
Yeah, but considering that Joe Gasaki is actually quite fit as a person, because he works out, including climbing his titty wall, it's hard to get him into public flogging status. Especially considering that there's another thing about Joe Gasaki. He's a super senior. A super senior. 8 years at the university.
Yep, in spite of looking like the model student for when it comes to actually doing the student thing, he sucks.
Mm-hmm. Now, during this one, we get the old woman once again telling our protagonist, the old fortune teller, she's like, "Hey, yeah, you're really talented, and I foresee that there's a great opportunity hanging before you. Take it and grasp it. That'll be 2,000 yen." And unfortunately, our protagonist does not get that chance because after the expose film is shown, and Akashi says, "I liked your other films better, but I'll hold them off while you run." He finally gets back to his boarding house and his boarding room, notices the mochiguman hanging from his drawstring for his light, and a castella cake that's been partially eaten, and laments that he didn't get to follow that particular path and that his films never really took off the ground. And so he wonders what would happen if he chose a different circle when he started his college life. Cue clock reversal scene.
Mm-hmm. And that different life, that different choice in this case is the cycling club. Unfortunately, he's nowhere near the kind of athlete. He thought it would be just light cycling. He didn't realize it was a spinning class.
Not just a spinning class, but a class of guys who are basically setting themselves up as professional cyclists. Like, think Lance Armstrong without the drugs. And with both testicles.
Mm-hmm. But he spent 2 years trying to save money to build a road bike, which he finally is able to do, even naming the thing.
Yep. And it is in these 2 years that he does meet Ozu again, but ignores him. Says, "Fuck you, I'm gonna do all this shit to get me the lightest road bike I can." And ignores Ozu and his classes and his grades, all to get jobs to get the lightest pieces for his bike.
Mm-hmm. Uh, and then it gets stolen because of a certain bike parking safety committee that seems to be run by gorilla men.
Literally, they look like gorillas,
Hmm.
and they're kind of some of their sergeants or lieutenants, whatever you might call them, look like monkeys.
And have a reputation for taking any bike that is seen as violating bike parking rules, quote unquote.
Yep. The cheery cycling cleanup crew, I believe it was named.
Hmm. But he ends up getting recruited as the pilot for the Birdman glider that the Birdman Circle is being built is building. The problem is he didn't get the fine print on the matter, and ends up training to try and prepare for it, with Jogasaki as his trainer.
What's really funny is he it really wasn't fine print. Like the president of the Birdman Club and Akashi both said, "You don't need to do anything. You are the perfect body type right now for our project."
But he was so dead set on not screwing this up, because previously for a race he had gotten humiliated
Because his bike was stolen and he used his old bike. And the old bike was actually transported to the finish line before the race even started, and he had to wait for it to be transported back to him. And by that point, the race was basically over. So he ran the race up to a point where he got into an izakaya and saw the winner being crowned, which was this guy in a weird yukata and geta who had used his stolen bike. It's like, that's my bike!
Mm-hmm.
And then he pedaled all the way back to Kyoto, all the way back to the Kamo Bridge and the Kamo River, and fell asleep drinking next to the river, which is when Akashi finds him and says, "Yo, join Birdman Group so you can be the pilot for our Birdman thing."
Mm-hmm. But then things take a turn for the worse, because Ozu, well, actually, before I even get that, he ends up doing extensive training, and the problem is, the bulking up that he did during this training meant that he's now too heavy for the glider,
And also won't fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so now they have no choice but to have Akashi fly it as originally intended, because she's the only one whose body size it'll fit for, and body weight. They even say the tolerances here are very, very fine. You didn't need to do anything. Why did you train? And he feels really bad. And Akashi's like, don't feel bad. I just failed to account for the fact that you train. I didn't think you'd train. Which shows how people kind of perceive our protagonist.
Mm-hmm. But then that same committee tries to steal the glider, because it's made very clear that even though it's claimed in the name of safety, it's really just a racket to sell these stolen bikes off.
Especially if they're really, really good stolen bikes.
Mm-hmm. And it turns out the leader, who up until this point was always seen in a cap and a heavy trench coat, you know, the whole three insert animal here in a trench coat thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out it's Ozu, who gives him the outfits so that our protagonist gets framed.
But Akashi believes him when he says, "It wasn't me, it was Ozu." But the little part that they have the Birdman glider on is on some train tracks and starts going down the tracks, and he's still stuck on it. And Akashi is biking behind him, trying to help him and trying to get him off of the thing, because now it's too late. The glider's going to splash down in the river. That's just going to happen. So he gets in the glider. He detaches it from the cart so that the downward run of this cart actually helps generate lift. And when he tries to look for the pedals so that he can continue to give it thrust, he puts his feet through the floor of the glider accidentally, and he asks Akashi, "Where are the pedals?" Akashi goes, "We're in the unpowered category!" And with that, he crashes into the Kamo River.
Show of hands, who here has seen Flugtag?
I have.
For those who don't know, Flugtag is a human-powered flight event that's held as one of the many weird sporting events that Red Bull does every year. Oh, and the idea is simple: you have to make a human-powered glider, no pedals, nothing like that, and see how long you last before you end up taking a dip. Some people might say, well, if it's engineered enough, could you fly without taking a dip? No, you are going to be taking a dip in the pool. It's just a matter of how far you go before you drop.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the designs are more interesting than others. I'll put it that way. But once again, as the glider is being crashed, he thinks, would I have had a better shot if I chose a different club? And the funny thing is, in the next one, he doesn't choose a club per se. Instead, he chooses to be a disciple of a man named Higuchi. The man who had previously been seen as the god of matchmaking and the guy who ended up winning that race.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mr. Crimson Chin himself.
Who was referred to as Eggplant Head.
Though we refer to him as Pelican.
That's for the way he eats at the beginning of this fucking episode. They're eating mystery.
Just pulls a big fucking meatball the size of my head and just chomps.
Mm-hmm. It's mystery hot pot, which is actually a thing that college kids low on their funds do. They basically make a hot pot out of whatever random ingredients they have. In this case, the random ingredients are a little more random than usual, because along with edible items like mushrooms and meatballs and stuff, we also see things like literally Legos and pencil erasers.
Uh-huh.
But when he pulls out a giant-ass meatball bigger than his own head, he just opens up his mouth, as Monk put it, and chomps right down and eats half of that fucking thing, and it puffs out one side of his cheeks. That's it.
Yep.
But the whole thing is, he meets Ozu very early on, because Ozu was already a disciple of Higuchi just before they roped in the protagonist. And then later, Akashi also becomes a disciple of Higuchi. There's also one other person, a girl named Hanuki, who is a dental hygienist and technically still attending the college, though she is an alumnus of some of the classes. And she also hangs out with Higuchi. And the whole point of this is they're told to do a series of weird, mundane tasks that are like pranks to Jogasaki. They also do things like help protect their master from the library police, or discover Jogasaki's particular pranks, like when he dyed Higuchi's yukata pink. At the end of all of this, the protagonist is given 100,000 yen, which is quite a lot of money. If I look at it right now, that's going to be about 682 US dollars. That's probably less than it would have been in 2010 when this show came out, due to exchange rates and changing, inflation and all that bullshit. But still, that's $700 to find something called a tortoise brush, which tortoise brushes, I think, are called as such because they kind of have a tortoise pattern on the handle. Tortoise shell. It's basically tortoise shell handle. But it's a scrubbing brush that he's been told to find. A mythical tortoise brush that can purportedly clean anything. And it's at this point that we learn that shopkeepers in Kyoto are portrayed as people with seafood for head. Octopi, fishes, etc. And at first, the protagonist is getting nowhere. Then Akashi sees him, and she starts helping him out. And they go back to some of the places he's already been, and they finally get directions to a guy who is willing to sell it for 100,000 yen. And he gets the tortoise brush, and he brings it back to Higuchi. And Higuchi goes, "Okay, so you found the tortoise brush. You are my successor in the next generation of an eternal proxy war that we've been having, in which case Jogasaki and Higuchi are the representatives thereof." And when they meet Jogasaki on the Kamo Bridge, it turns out Ozu's a double agent all along. He's the one who did things like glue down Higuchi's geta and dye his yukata pink, and is the disciple successor for Jogasaki. They have a game of rock, paper, scissors as the very last thing. Higuchi loses, and he says he's going to go on a trip because he finally finished the book that he'd been reading that the library police had been after him, which was Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues. Or was it Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days? I'm pretty sure it was 20,000 Leagues. But,
No, you're right. It is 20,000 Leagues.
I was pretty sure it was 20,000 Leagues. But because Jogasaki wins the rock, paper, scissors match, this means that Ozu gets to fire the first volley in the proxy war against the protagonist. And the protagonist, feeling the literal weight of all his predecessors atop him, which is literally shown as a stack of ghostly people standing on his shoulders over and over and over again, he says, "Fuck this!" Runs away back to his little room, finds the bag with the $100,000 or 100,000 yen in it, in there. He's like, "The fuck?" And he thinks it's the funding for to continue the proxy war that was promised by Higuchi. And then is briefly reminded once again of the old lady, who at this point has told him every time, reach out to the dangling opportunity in front of you. And in the Cycling Association episode had said that the fortune will cost him 3,000 yen, and then in this one, 4,000 yen. And there's another Castella cake there for him. This one completely uneaten, because I'm pretty sure Ozu had just delivered it.
I've always wondered what Castella cake would taste like, but given the look of this one, I probably shouldn't try it because of my allergies.
I don't know. I think Monk, I don't think that the top of the cake is actually frosted. I'm pretty sure that's the hardened rind of the cake.
Yeah, it's just from the ones that were shown in the anime. I'm thinking, I'd like to try one just for curiosity's sake, but there's also the possibility that it's chocolate on top.
It's not. In fact, here's in Parliament. This is what Castella cake looks like when it's cut, and it's the same yellow inside and brown top and bottom.
Okay, so that's
It's a sponge cake,
Yeah, I can handle that.
and you can frost it in whatever you like. Some Castella cakes are frosted, some aren't. Some are filled with custards.
Mm-hmm.
We see that the one in the show is just a simple Castella cake. Maybe it's flavored, and that's why it's yellow, but that may not be the case.
Yeah, it's just you know how it is with me and chocolate.
Yes. Do not feed the monk chocolate after midnight, or he will... Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong movie.
I'm a little too tall for that.
Yeah.
You see, Monk, we wouldn't call the movie Gremlins at that point. We'd call it Oni.
True.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Bungie would sue us.
They could try. It's different enough. This is a completely different idea. Fuck you. But, and of course, as he's eating the Castella cake, he once again wonders what would have happened if he had chosen a different circle.
Mm-hmm. Which, sorry, I had to step out for a second. So,
No worries.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
All right.
tag out, tag in.
Uh-huh.
Which one?
Softball Circle Honwaka.
Ah, so he decides to join the softball team instead. But there starts to be some very sus things about the kindness of the softball circle.
They're extremely kind and extremely focused on remaining very pro-social and remaining very well-adjusted. But the big thing is he decided to join this circle because he had once seen a girl named Kohinata, who was the daughter of the company that owns the team, which is a health food company named Honwaka. And she is the spitting image of the ideal raven-haired beauty that he's been having in every episode.
Mm-hmm. And he ends up trying to get in with the group by buying a whole lot of the company's products and trying to sell for the company, including putting on the costume. Which eventually leads to him being invited along with a bunch of others to the factory of the place. But even by this point, it's very clear the levels of sus have reached panic levels. We're not dealing with red flags. We're dealing with we are dealing with an army of red flags to the point where it looks like the University of Alabama Crimson Tide. Which, depending on where you are, that's probably going to make you cringe because you have to hear about Alabama fans not shutting the fuck up about Roll Tide.
But they eventually get to go to the company headquarters for Honwaka.
Yep.
Which is on its own estate, where they have all the bees. Because something I pointed out early on in the episode was a lot of their stuff apparently had royal jelly, including their tea. And so I had to bring up that royal jelly is hella expensive to make because royal jelly is only produced in large amounts for larvae in beehives that are being turned into queens. And so you basically have to force queen production higher and then harvest the royal jelly from the cells that the queen's larvae are in over and over again. It's and if I remember correctly, some of the other things they do is transplant the queen cells to new hives so that they at least have a continuing generation instead of continuing to harvest endlessly without making new queens, because otherwise your hive dies. But it was expensive stuff. What was the amount that I found?
I think for a small amount, we're talking like 8 ounces. It was $30.
So from Honey Pacifica, yeah, that's right. Royal jelly, 2 ounces, $20. Which then they have a 32-ounce version, which at that rate, that's going to be $320. Except Honey Pacifica is very nice. They give you a $190 discount, and it's only $130 for a 32-ounce jar of royal jelly.
Though, didn't you also say when we went down that rabbit hole that royal jelly is kind of overrated?
It's kind of overrated. Yes, it's not super. It's not super. It's not the superfood that many people think it is. It's good for you, sure. It contains large amounts of supplemental proteins, B vitamins, and it has some antibacterial components. And there's also reports, though I don't know how good or bad these reports are, that royal jelly can lower blood pressure, increase energy, and then other things like fat loss and skin rejuvenation when used as a topical ointment. Mm-hmm. Why would you spread royal jelly on your skin? That would feel like gross. But the point is that royal jelly, it can be used as a supplemental food to get some increased vitamin and protein intake, but it's not the wonder food that some people seem to think it is. Mm-hmm. So it is pretty overrated in many ways.
Yeah. But it's revealed that the company president has a few screws loose because he is one of those people who believed in that 2012 apocalypse. Remember when that was a thing?
Mayan calendar ends on 2012. We're all gonna die. No, it just means they didn't get to make more calendars, you dumbass.
I've had several debates with teachers on that shit.
And then of course a few years later we had the whole rapture thing, which I was bracing for comedy with that, and I was not disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I could do a 2-year class just on the number of times people have predicted the end of the world and then nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
But the president had built his own ark for the chosen ones. And if any of you are thinking, doesn't this sound like Heaven's Gate? Join the club.
Yeah, I pointed out that it sounded like the Aum Shinrikyo, which was go look that up. I'm not recounting how fucked the Aum Shinrikyo are and why a bunch of them got arrested back in the 90s.
Wasn't that the cult that had their own anime?
Yes.
And
an anime
also
that
the cult that got referenced in Earthbound.
Yep. They're a part of pop culture in Japan as the butt of every joke. But this Noah's Ark that he's built is going to also carry the animals, just like Noah's Ark. But it's not an ark. At least not in the traditional sense. It's a giant fucking Zeppelin. Like, giant fucking Zeppelin. Which Ozu then steals and crashes.
Because of course.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking Ozu.
And the protagonist gets dragged into this because he knows Ozu. And they're running along the train tracks in the mountains. They eventually meet the ramen shop owner who says, "Hey, you're getting the cart." And while they're over a bridge, he sends them off into a boat because then the Honwaka guys surround him and be like, let us check your cart. And they check his cart and nobody's in there. And they're in a boat going back to Kyoto.
Mm-hmm. And he ends up and obviously he ends up thinking about what would have changed if he took a different path. So for the next 3 episodes, he ends up deciding to go for fucking broke and joins 3 circles. The first of which is the English Conversation Circle, which I get the feeling that this joke would have landed different if we weren't all native English speakers.
You mean Joe English?
Yeah.
Probably.
But this is where in the first off there's the fact that I'm not going to get on the voice actors for their bad English because, well,
that's the point.
That's for one, that's the point. But what's even funnier is their understanding of English conversation,
where it's so confident and gets your ideas across because it's just a language of pure emotion. Fucking that assessment, it comes straight from the horse's mouth, aka Hanuki. She because the protagonist is having trouble like joining into these conversations. He doesn't really get it. And once again, Ozu is haunting him this life. And Hanuki knows Ozu because Ozu goes to her dentistry to get his teeth looked at. As a side note, as you see on the splash image there, Ozu's teeth are portrayed as quite sharp. And the protagonist actually tells Hanuki, I think he's just using you to get free gum massages from you. Because she's known to do really good gum massage, apparently. She's like, she's like, I don't think Ozu's into that. Oh, how right she was.
Yeah.
But we'll get there. But she's like, you have such problems with Ozu. Why not talk about him? It's clear you have emotions about him. And he begins OZ News, still pronounced Ozu, where he's also talking very rapidly in English in a very childish way. Like the way we originally see Hanuki speaking English, she says a few very simple sentences and then does like sound effects and talks about how she punched out the dentist that keeps trying to feel her up and shit. Because that's her big hit in the English speaking circle, is whenever she tells them about the sexual harassment dentist. And she talks about bam bam KO, known touch, and things of that nature, which is honestly hilarious and cute. But no, she is not cute and funny in that way. I know what you're all thinking. Shut up. The whole thing is Hanuki reveals that she doesn't drink alcohol with people she doesn't feel close with. And a little detail that we found out during the Disciple episode is that she goes overboard when she drinks with people. Like one time he woke up outside the fucking electric plant in Kyoto for no reason.
Usually to get that level of blackout, you got to go to like Roppongi.
Kyoto has its own districts like Roppongi.
I know, but we can't talk about the Roppongi stories or the Roppongi incident, otherwise we get kicked off YouTube.
Yep. Yeah. What happens in Roppongi stays in Roppongi.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But Hanuki eventually, they go to cafes pretty regularly, talking to each other, and This is where we actually find out that Hanuki is technically dating Higuchi. But Higuchi, being the layabout that we've seen him be in every one of these cycles so far, also kind of neglects her. Like a dick. And she starts feeling disheartened. And she gets texts when they're at cafes sometimes from the sexual harassment doctor or dentist, including a picture of the Kyoto Tower, which I did confirm actually looks like the Kyoto Tower to everybody on that episode.
Yeah.
But she's dispirited because of the lack of attention from Higuchi and the fact that she has this hound, this horny hound after her constantly. And she kind of goes, maybe I'd just be better off going with somebody who at least tries to hit me up every day. And the protagonist's like, I don't think that's the best idea. But he kind of keeps to himself. Now, at the same time, the protagonist has been told that he is a safe bet who would never do anything weird to anything, and thus Jogasaki has entrusted Kaori to him, because at this time Ozu had done the hit piece expose movie to Jogasaki, but without our protagonist, because our protagonist is in a different circle this time. And he's like, just watch her for a little while. And he's also grown to weirdly personalize her and think of her as a distinguished lady and not just, some love doll he's watching for a dude.
To the point of hearing her quote-unquote voice?
No, he hears her voice. He does. He really does. It's not hallucination, Monk. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sand check?
Sand check. He rolled a critical fail. But on top of that, he's also been exchanging letters for the last 2 years with a kind and gentle woman who sounds like someone ideal to him that he's also kind of exaggerated himself about sometimes. And it's at this time that he is told that he needs to... It's about the time that Jogasaki says he's going to retrieve the doll soon, that he's told that he really needs to watch the doll. And he's also told that he needs to meet the letter writing girl at a cafe. And these were both happening on the same day. And then after some of his cafe encounters with Hanuki, she's been dispirited in the English circle and hasn't really been talking with the same passion she used to. It's very straightforward stuff. And she eventually says, hey, you want to go for drinks tonight? And it's the same night that Jogasaki is supposed to be claiming Kaori, and also the same night that he's supposed to go see Letter Girl. He's like, I can't. I have a report to write. It's like, oh, okay, sorry. And he gets back to his room in the boarding house and goes, fuck. She might be going to see that shitty-ass dentist. I've got to stop her. This is a mistake. She wanted moral support. She wanted somebody to accompany her. And so he rushes to the bar that's actually on the Kyoto Tower, excuse me. And she's there having dinner with Jogasaki. He's like, wait, what the fuck? And Jogasaki's like, wait, what the fuck? Why aren't you at home? And they get into a drinking contest that the protagonist somehow fucking wins. Hanuki then takes him around a bunch of bars and then finally back to her place. And it's at this point we have to mention a character that has been here since the beginning of the episode. Voiced by Nobuyuki Hiyama. Oh, though he made this character.
Absolutely.
A cowboy character who, like I said, seems like it's probably a little bit inspired by Woody's appearance in Toy Story, named Johnny. And he's named Johnny because he is the personification of the character's libido and, well, his Johnny. And the reason that this needs to be mentioned now is this entire episode started in medias res, with the protagonist locked in Hanuki's bathroom and talking about the three girls that he has to choose between. But we finally come full circle back to her apartment. They're sitting on her couch. She's drunk. He's drunk. Johnny's like, dude, go for it! And our protagonist, being the fucking retard he is, god damn. Like, I can't, and eventually rushes to her bathroom. But not before she does one other thing that she does when she's drunk and goes overboard, and licks his face. Apparently it's a thing she does whenever she goes drunk and overboard, is licking faces. But he goes into her bathroom, and just locks himself in there for the night until she's taken away to rest because she's now puking. But he didn't. And of course, Johnny yells at him like, dude, what the fuck? But the protagonist has this weird, hollow sense of, I did the right thing. When Ozu comes and tells him to open the door. Because Ozu was the one who retrieved the Kaori doll and then was asked to find out if he's okay and also to apologize in Hanuki's stead. But the protagonist then regrets that he didn't take his shot after all, and he didn't take his shot with Kaori, and he missed out on meeting the girl at the cafe, and wonders what would have happened if he'd made a different choice. But this time it's not a choice about the circle.
No, it's episode 6, 7, and 8 are focused on each of the 3 clubs that he joins. The second one is the Hero Show Association Circle.
For those of you who know the monastery, this means tokusatsu.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And we learned that he joined it at the very opening of his college years, and was dancing in mochiguman costumes to entertain children at the mall, and even saved a young high school girl from some dudes who were hitting on her.
And of course, this similar set of events happen. He's asked to be Kaori's bodyguard, and it focuses more. This one focuses more on Kaori, and this is where the whole voice thing really comes into play, where it's almost as if Kaori is tempting him to elope with her. And once again, there is the argument with himself and his Johnny when he hesitates. He almost gives in, and Jogasaki cock blocks him by kicking him in the face.
And he even says, "This is right. This is correct. Someone as vulgar as me could never make her happy," which is fucking weird because I'm pretty sure Jogasaki is way more vulgar than the protagonist. Yeah, this almost the same exact series of events happens. We just happen to find out that that he worked with the Mochiguman group for a while. And he made the choice for Kaori instead of for Hanuki this time, or in that case, no one.
Yep.
But as his face is down in the mud at this point, that's when he wonders, what if I had made a different choice?
Mm-hmm. Which brings us to the third of the clubs, Reading Circle C. Which, of course, is spelled in all English caps.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of this particular one focuses on the letter writing affair and how he had really been exaggerating all of the events leading up to this point.
Well, also exaggerating himself as a guy who went skiing and a guy who played, sports at the highest level
and somehow was a dual citizen in both Japan and the States, and had met several celebrities, including meeting Kobe Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
But it's revealed that a bit into it, when he goes to Keiko's apartment, only to find Ozu there, that the whole thing was one giant setup.
Mm-hmm.
That Ozu was doing the letters as a elaborate prank, which he eventually got bored of, and Akashi wrote the letters in his stead.
The well, Akachi was always writing the letters because he needed a female's handwriting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Ozu stopped inputting for them anymore. But we find out that the entire reason Akashi continued to write the letters as thanks for when, all the way back at the beginning of his college years, he saved some high school girl from some dudes while in a Mochiguman suit.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the girl had actually been Akashi while she was still in high school, and it's the white Mochiguman suit, which is important because that's the Mochiguman he keeps finding.
Yep.
And at that point, the entire reason she tells him all this is because she feels bad about it. And he goes home without asking Akashi out. And Johnny just fucking tears into him.
You know, I realize Johnny's goal is just to get laid, but sometimes you have to give the devil his due.
Not only that, but Johnny's focus in the moment is to get him laid. There are times after the moments have passed where Johnny gets on his case, and it's genuine advice.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes your dick gives you good advice. Who'd have thunk?
But that brings us to the secret society Lucky Cat Chinese restaurant, wherein in a different choice, he ends up joining a secret society that has been tied to some of the campus activities seen up to this point.
The library police, the report club that was giving the protagonist reports so he wouldn't fail his classes, the cheery cycling company, all of them.
Mm-hmm. And while he doesn't do very good at the missions that he's given, Ozu does very well. Ends up becoming the leader. The protagonist goes through the ranks, but still feels dissatisfied. Higuchi tells him what we already know, that rose-colored campus life doesn't exist. Though in the process,
Yeah, there's no such thing as perfection, essentially.
Though in the process, he ends up learning that Ozu has a girlfriend,
which happens to be Kohinata, the girl who is the daughter of the cult leader.
Yep. But and that pretty much destroys him because while he was going through this unfulfillment, Ozu was enjoying his college years. So he decides if every choice I make is going to lead to some problem, and I've been wasting my time, I'm just going to stay in my 4.5 tatami room. But time does not rewind.
Even though we do go back to freshman year.
Mm-hmm. But he just spends all his time in his room.
Or going to class.
Mm-hmm. And one morning realizes that that his room has now become infinite.
If he looks out his window, there's another copy of his room. He opens the door outside to the hallway that would normally be there. There's another version of his room. Though there's a Castella cake in front of the door. Every time.
Mm-hmm. Hang on a minute.
Now, he gets stuck. The lead up to this reveal that he's infinitely stuck is Everybody on campus refers to him as the Yojohan Shugisa, or 4.5 tatami ideologue. And he does this small little bit about how back in ancient times there was the 2 tatami times, and then the 3 tatami times. And then they exploded all the way up to the Cambrian explosion, and through the Jurassic period, and all the way up till the 4.5 tatami age. Now, you may be asking yourself, what the hell is 4.5 tatami? And why is it so important that it's actually the Japanese name of this entire book and series? So, a lot of the time, rooms are measured in how many tatami mats are on the floor, or fill up the floor. 4.5 tatami is actually a structure where the tatami are laid in a square formation, the normal tatami mats, and that leaves a half tatami block in the center, where you can put a half tatami block in there. And he lauds it as the most versatile and expressive way to lay out a room, that anything bigger would just be hubris, and anything smaller is just not big enough. And it's then that he finds himself stuck in this 4.5 tatami infinite hellhole, or as I called it, as I called out in my blurb for this week, the hyper tatami room cube. He eventually has to do the normal things, people do, like, well, urinate, defecate, etc. And he does them in other rooms that he plans to never return to. And he finds a castella cake and fish cakes in every room he goes to, so he doesn't have to worry about food. Water seems to be running, so he doesn't have to worry about water or washing. There's always clean clothes in the next room, so he doesn't have to worry about that. Eventually he starts exploring each room, and he finds a wallet that has 1,000 yen in it. He's like, oh, great, I'm going to put it in this rucksack, and every one I find, I'm going to take that 1,000 yen, and I'm going to put it in the rucksack, and I'm going to be rich by the time I finally get out of this infinite hellhole. But he also starts going crazy, and he also grows a beard. Pretty good one, too. And he eventually starts observing the rooms he moves through, and notices that each room is slightly different. He finds, in one room, cycling parts. In another, movies. In another, a bunch of health food, which actually goes all the way back to the Honwaka episode. There was a part where it looked like some dude stuck his head through the window of our protagonist's room from out of nowhere during the Honwaka episode, and it freaks out the protagonist, so he stacks boxes in front of the window to prevent an intruder from coming in. We now see the other side of this. The protagonist was sticking his head through the dimensional gap to look at this room full of stuff. And now, as we've gone through all of these episodes, from 6 through 8 and 9, the old woman has appeared every time, and has taken, again, an increasing amount of money from him every time, telling him, you're talented, there's an opportunity before you, you should take it. Except for episode 9. He never finds the Mochigumon in that episode, though it keeps trying to find him. Even Ozu says this, because Ozu has found the Mochigumon piece, and is like, it's like it kept trying to find someone, but we found it. Because they're trying to get the Birdman thing from Akashi. And this time he really is leading the cycling club and did steal the Birdman thing from Akashi in episode 9. But in episode 10, we see the various rooms that his alternate lives have been in. And he starts rueing the fact that he wasted 2 years in his room doing nothing. Because at least, had he done something, he would have connected to people. And he starts personalizing people that he's obliquely getting throughout all of this, including Ozu. And he thinks Ozu is his best friend. Like the best friend he could have ever had.
Oh my
Even if the guy does prank him somewhat. And eventually, he collapses due to the sheer loneliness. And these episodes are ones where we have a lot of the background pictures that are basically real life pictured and colored showing. Like, really, the only animated stuff is the protagonist and the things he interacts with. The actual background objects are just pictures of a real place that are colored differently and stacked a little differently from time to time. But when he collapses in loneliness, we don't get the time rewind again, because this is actually a two-parter. We in the 11th episode, we pull up again on the protagonist still stuck in the Tatami world, and he's come to the conclusion that this is an infinite series. He'll either never find a way out, or he'll eventually find the edge. And then finally, he hits the room he started in. He even sees the door labeled as bathroom, where he left all his elimination. And it's here that he has seen the old woman talking to the other versions of himself, or at least the evidence thereof. And he also notices that from every drawstring in every room, the lost white Mochiguman hangs from that drawstring. And it's at this point that the protagonist comes to the conclusion that, holy shit, I'm in love with this girl. And as he does so...
Enough.
God, fucking... You're not wrong there, Coops. As he does this, there have been... As he's been traveling, there have been 3 moths gathered around the light in every room. And a giant wave of moths, as he comes to this conclusion, sweep him out the window and onto the streets outside of the infinite series of tatami rooms, and back to the night of Gozan from the first episode. Now, there have been hints of something as we've been going through some of these episodes when Ozu does show up, but the protagonist is not present. Ozu almost looks normal. He doesn't look like the pointy-teethed kappa yokai that we continue to see. And when we get to this night of Gozan, in a world where the protagonist has never actually known Ozu except through the references that he finds in each room, when we finally see Ozu running on the banisters and handrails of the Kamo Bridge, he looks normal, like a normal person. He no longer looks like a monster. And it's here that we learn that a lot of things have been coloring. A lot of the perceptions of the protagonist have been coloring the stories, which kind of figures. It actually shows that the protagonist might be a bit, not a big one, but a bit of an what's the word I'm looking for? Unreliable narrator. There we go. That's the term. That's an actual term, literary term. And he sees that Ozu has already crashed the arc trying to get to Kohinata, and is still being chased by the secret society and by Jogasaki and by the Honwaka people for all the pranks he's pulled and all the stuff he's done. And our protagonist is like, I gotta save him. He can't get hurt here. I gotta save him. And he starts running. And as he starts running, his clothes start falling off, and his beard starts falling off, and he becomes this actually kind of muscle. Like he's fit. He's not like a wimp like he was in the cycling one. He's actually kind of fit and naked. And he goes to save Ozu, and he saves Ozu even though Ozu still broke his leg in the fall into the river. And he goes, "I'm your friend," and Ozu's like, "I don't even know who you are." And Higuchi shows up, and Takashi shows up, and Jogasaki and everybody else show up, and Higuchi convinces the crowd that, you know, with a broken leg, Ozu's not going to be able to go anywhere, so they should just wait for him to get out of the hospital before making him pay his penance. Higuchi goes, "Are you okay? You're kind of naked. Here, wear my neck scarf to at least block off your private bits." He's like, "Oh yeah, sure, thanks." And he even says, "Thank you, Shisho," which is master. And Higuchi's like, "You've never been one of my disciples." But because of his vicarious experience of the entire cast through the infinite tatami rooms, he feels like he knows everybody. And that's finally where he gets to Akashi, because he still has the Mochi Gumon he tore out of the infinite tatami rooms to take with him into the real world. She talks about how she hates moths. He hands her the last Mochi Gumon and says, "You want to go get some ramen?" And the whole cast goes to the cat ramen shop behind the shrine to eat the ramen. And at this point, he's put on his normal, everyday look. And Akashi's like, "Is it really that delicious?" He's like, "It is. It's the best thing in the world right now." And they basically get together. For an epilogue, we see Akashi and our protagonist go visit Ozu in the hospital with his broken leg, while at the same time Higuchi is leaving, and the protagonist tells Higuchi, "Yo, you should take Hanuki along. She loves you. I know that you're going to go on this world trip, but seriously, take her along." And Higuchi kind of gives him a look, is like, "Oh." And they go inside and they see Ozu, and again, Ozu looks normal dude. And at this point where the protagonist likes to rib him and go, yo, you had a girlfriend, eh? Blah 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 blah, making fun of him a little bit. The protagonist's face starts turning into Ozu's old face, and he even says Ozu's old lines of, "This is how I show my love. We're connected by the black thread of fate."
And Ozu is completely repulsed.
Yeah. And as we start going out to the closing credits, we see Higuchi goes on his world tour and did bring Hanuki along. Jogasaki is incredibly happy with his love doll. We see the happy endings for the cast. And then we see the opening, not the closing, the opening for the show. Because at the beginning of episode 11, they actually played the entire credit sequence, but the animations were reversed and turned blue from the normal yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And with that, the 4.5 tatami age, or Yojo Hanki, ended.
Now, I do want to note that this anime actually won 2 awards in Japan. At the 14th Japan Media Arts Festival, it won the grand prize for the animation division, and the 10th Tokyo Anime Award, it won Best Picture for TV Series.
That doesn't surprise me.
And and as far as the Media Arts Festival, it was the first TV series to win the award. Which is saying something, because television doesn't usually win that kind of thing. The judges had argued differently. There were some follow-ups. There was a follow-up to the original novel, which was later animated by Toho, called Night is Short, Walk On Girl, which is viewed as a spiritual sequel to Tatami Galaxy, and was also directed by Yuasa.
Mm-hmm. And the reason it's seen as a spiritual successor is she meets people like Hanuki and Higuchi, and she even meets Todo, which I believe was the name of the perverted dentist.
Mm-hmm. But there was also another follow-up in the Tatami Time Machine Blues, which was a 6-episode net animation that was not directed by Yuasa, was directed by Shingo Natsume, and was animated by Science Saru. Which is still tangentially related to Yuasa, so there is that. It came out last year. It was only 6 episodes.
And they even collated it into a movie as well.
Mm-hmm. But with that said, I'd say this is as good a time as any for us to give our final judgments.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked a lot, and we're going to talk a little bit more, as per usual, on this in this monastery. But we now come to our final deliberation. So first, Brother Flutter, what have you got for me?
So, as expected, on account of Yuasa directing, this is very much an anime that can be considered a mindfuck. However, it is a very interesting case because it deals with a lot of psychological issues. And well, yes, not a lot of people. This will not be for everyone. Naturally, I very much enjoyed it, and it's very much enjoyable with friends, like in this case. So, with that, I declare this series weeb.
All right. Brother Flutter has given us a vote of weeb. Brother Akira, what have you got for me?
My first go around. Most of the things Flat has already said, I can already pretty much echo that. However, for me personally, the fact that the episode structure of this anime kind of reminds me of the Endless Eight from Haruhi Suzumiya kind of turns me off a bit. The art and animation, while it is very unique, did get boring just to see after a while. And also another thing, the fact that in some cases the characters can just talk like extremely freaking fast to the point where even the subtitles don't even give you enough time to read them. Honestly, which honestly is pretty fine. Me personally, it kind of just turned me off from the whole experience and damn near made me fall asleep in some cases. So with that, I declared this one scrub.
All right. Brother Akira has given us a vote of scrub, leaving us tied at 1-1. Monk, what do you got for us?
So, obviously, this is not my first go-around with Tatami.
Monk?
Oh, not... God damn it,
Oh,
not again.
for fuck's sake. Now of all times.
Okay, how about now?
I can
There
hear
we
you,
go.
Monk. What do you got for me?
So, I'm not going to say that this was the first instance of this, but this was the first instance I was aware of Yuasa only directing and not being a writer-director. And what it ends up demonstrating is that you can have him do phenomenal stuff when you keep him on a relative leash, and don't let him go way too far off into the forest. I will admit that if I'm being honest, I feel like this is something that works much better in the television format than in a DVD/binge format. Even if we weren't binging the whole series, I could see that it's something that is better served spread out. Like when I say spread out, I mean like one episode a week.
That way you have the
Yeah,
time
I can see
to
that.
consume it.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, that doesn't quite work with our setup, given how we try to do 3-episode sets each week when we watch. But I get the feeling that was the intended pace was a episode a week approach. I don't have any proof of that. It's just a gut feeling based on how things are structured. Much in the same way that you could probably end up falling asleep watching a syndicated television show that's meant to be the problem of the week format. Those kind of things are not really meant to be marathoned like that. They're only marathoned when a network needs to kill time.
Mm-hmm.
But
Definitely doesn't fit the Netflix model then. Yeah.
pretty much. and because and one of the other things I will note with this is the fact that there are it sometimes sticks to its formula a little too well. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to make the Endless 8 comparison, because truth be told, I actually think this has a better sense of variety than Endless 8.
So do I.
This is a standard chamber play of an anime. It's just a chamber play where you're revisiting the thing multiple times. If some of you remember the PS2 game Shadow of Destiny, you're not too far off. How's that for a deep cut?
I can see the bone, Monk. In fact, I can see my liver.
But because of all of that, even with those faults, I do think this is one that is worth seeing and definitely earned the awards it got. So with that in mind, and especially since you also would go on to do bigger and better things, I'm giving this a vote of weeb.
All right. With the Monk, we have 2 votes of weeb and 1 vote of scrub. As for myself, I find myself a bit torn here. Normally, I would go on my own personal experience, and that would be that. But with the way that Tatami Galaxy is, its age, and the way that the anime landscape has changed in the intervening near on 14 years, I feel that I have to give disclaimers for both myself and for the larger audiences. For myself, the music is fantastic. The sound engineering is also very good. It's very evocative of the feelings they want to get across for specific scenes. And while it never overpowers or becomes a triumphant swell, it definitely accents what needs to be accented. The characters are all very distinct, have their own personalities, and in their own ways, all of them are lovable. Even Jogasaki. Jogasaki's my whipping boy for this one, just in case nobody got that. Junichi Suabe does a great voice for him, though. And that's another thing. The voice cast for this particular project was riddled with some really nice voices. Like, we already mentioned Nobuyuki Hiyama, but, Junichi Suabe, the unfortunately late but always great Keiji Fujiwara for Higuchi, Maya Sakamoto for Akashi, Hiroyuki Yoshino for Ozu. If you've watched anything in very, very recent times for Hiroyuki Yoshino, for example, in Call of the Night, he was Akihito Akiyama. In Spy Family, he plays Frankie, the Afro guy who helps out Tasogare with his information and his gadgets sometimes. He's even got a part for Bishimi in the new Rurouni Kenshin, and he's played Alleluia Haptism in Mobile Suit Gundam 00.
Nice.
So there's a vast majority of storied names amongst our erstwhile cast, and that's going to be appealing to anyone who does watch subbed anime. That's going to just, they're going to hear voices that they are familiar with and like. The animation art style is unique. It's, in my opinion, the way that they tried to evoke things through simplicity was definitely inspired by probably the cover art of the novel. Because the cover art of the novel, while it looks like a mishmashed mess because of the way that it intersplices different scenes from the book itself, it's still, everything in it is still pretty simple. And it also, because of that simplicity, you got a clear understanding of who and what each person was without even hearing them. Especially people like Ozu, or Jogasaki, or even Higuchi. Higuchi, because he's dressed in geta and a yukata at all times, you already know he's a dreamer. He's a bit of a lofty idealist, and you could tell that just because he feels that way from the way he looks. The dialogue is a definite issue for people who don't speed read, because the protagonist speaks super rapidly. He's the fastest talker in the whole show.
I ended up referencing Blur from Transformers, which that should tell you
Yeah.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's very apt.
He would say multiple sentences to sometimes multiple paragraphs in what sounded like the same voice and in the same breath.
Uh-huh.
And it led to the subtitles being a mishmash at times, because you'd either have to keep up with them or just lose the plot. I deliberately would reverse the video for my fellow brothers here so that they could read those subtitles that they were missing. And that's a definite demerit for people who don't already practice reading quick subtitles. And that's not a common thing in the West.
Mm-mm.
So, the entire reason I'm so split here is, from the shining compliments I'm giving, people should know what my personal rating is. But because of the fact that I'd love to recommend this, but know that it would not suit so many people, I'm hesitant to do so. And because of that, because I find myself hesitating to make this a general recommendation, I cannot in good conscience rate this weeb and must rate it scrub. In which case, we end up with a tie, Monk.
For the first time, we are at a draw.
Uh-huh.
We
Yeah,
are at
damn.
a draw. Tatami Galaxy, while I personally love it, I cannot make it a recommendation. And because of that, that's why I said scrub. And so, Tatami Galaxy, I guess the label we have to give it is, your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
That's appropriate.
Hmm.
Very.
I can go with that.
It was while we were actually reviewing now that I realized that there were so many things I just couldn't recommend it over. That was my biggest issue. I was like, In the moment, I'm all gung ho about it, but reviewing it after the fact, I see where it's going to have issues.
Hmm.
But with that, Monk, I think it's time to spin the wheel, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, boy.
Wheel of morality, turn, turn, turn. Tell us the lesson that we should learn.
All right, let's see what we got. Camphor.
Yes. It's become a running theme that anytime we hit an anime I am familiar with. I'm very excited.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So stay tuned in a few weeks as we will be covering that. I should note that if it had gone just a little, this is one of those cases of a near dodge. The near dodge would have been Irina. Irina, the vampire cosmonaut. But comfort it is. Which should be interesting, and this is going to be one of those cases where I'm going in somewhat blind, since I'm familiar with the series, but that's as far as I went.
I feel like I might be the only one who's watched Comfort.
Yep.
I haven't.
Yeah.
Um,
I haven't either.
I can say that I do see that there was a follow-up. Just looking at it. Obviously, we're not covering the follow-up.
Yeah, naturally.
But it's 12 episodes, so we should be good.
Yep, 12
Mhm.
episodes, and a couple OVAs. But truth be told, when it comes to those sorts of extra episode OVAs, they're not really all that consequential.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's a case where it's going to be necessary. I will note this is one of those cases where there's more material in the light novel than there is the anime we're covering. But it is what it is. So so please look forward to when we end up covering that. But there are a few other things that are going to be covered in the coming days. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be doing an interview on Wednesday, and tomorrow will be the return of the Men Who Stare at Sports Ball. So please look forward to all of that. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.